Hello, this is Pastor John of Crossway Multinational Church, and this is now episode 11 of our Crosslight podcast. Before jumping in, I just want to say how encouraged I am from this past weekend. It started early with a retreat with our elders, Friday afternoon through Saturday afternoon. How encouraging it was for me. Times of rich conversations, prayer together, fun times together, doing practical things to get work done. I'm really thankful for that time and for God's gift of these elders in that space. So I'm thankful for that. And also the day Sunday was very encouraging with, of course, our wonderful meal. Also the times to hear testimony about God's work in challenging places, in times of persecution. It's wonderful to hear testimony of how God has brought real good, even through great challenge, and the confidence that He will keep doing that. We are thankful for the ways that we in our community can be directly connected with people enduring persecutions beyond anything that I know, and yet to be encouraged and strengthened and called to participate in ways that we can in supporting them. So I'm encouraged. In this podcast, we've been spending a bit of time thinking about the vision to be a radiant church, a radiant community, and we want to be a church that shows the multifaceted wisdom and glory of God in ways that show His beauty, and what a privilege that is. We long to be a church that shows His character and shows His will being lived out on earth. So we pray and we seek after that. As a part of that, we've been thinking about conversations, and sometimes we call them complex conversations. Today, I'm thinking of the word vibrant conversations. There's energy, there's movement. Sometimes they're challenging. Sometimes they aren't negative in the challenge. They're really rich and encouraging times. And we want to know, what does that look like? The key thing we've been thinking about is it's talking about complex things. So things that aren't simple, multiple perspectives in them. And we do that in a way that builds us up and builds us together rather than tearing us down and tearing us apart. And we want to learn how to do that. So over the last two episodes, thinking about the foundation and the entry door, thinking of the idea of the metaphor of a family room conversation, to have the people together in a house who are in a household together to talk things through together in a way that helps us in our journey. The foundation, so we looked at some of our core beliefs about God, about the world, about people, and about sin. Especially, God has made a good world. He is a God of order and love and goodness, and He made a world that is like that. He made people in His image, and yet all of us are affected by the reality of sin, where we go our own ways. This leads us to have a fundamental optimism, to operate in love and humility with faith and courage. So that's the foundation of this house. And then last time we thought a bit about the entry door. We thought about how we choose to come together. And some of the key things that stood out there is that we come with an optimistic, caring curiosity, expecting to learning good things, to care for people in the conversation. The commitment to remain present, to be there, and to continue to be in that space together. The commitment not to think we can use X-ray vision and see what's in people's hearts and minds that they don't tell us, and to have an assumption of what is good and right. And so these are our characteristics of how we choose to come together. Then we today are looking at shared boundaries. So what are the walls on this house, this space? Just want to highlight a couple of ideas. First of all is time. When we step into these vibrant conversations, we want to have a shared understanding of how long they'll go. For some of us, time is not a factor at all. We step into these conversations and they're rich and satisfying, and we could just talk and talk until we collapse. And others find it takes a lot of energy to engage in these conversations. And so the reality is some of us step into this space and time is no longer an issue, and some of us need to be looking for a time when they'll be done, that when we can take a breath and in some sense recover. So we need to be in agreement. How long is this going to go on? So that some of us aren't longing for it to end while others assume that it'll just go on and on. So we agree to that. We agree to the topic. So we expect that when we step into these conversations, we know what we're going to talk about. Now, one answer to that question is whatever comes. And so that would be something we could agree on. That we're just going to talk about whatever comes up, and wherever it goes, we'll go there. Or we say, when we step into the conversation, this is what we're going to talk about this time. There are boundaries on it. And if somebody starts to wander off of that territory, that we say, well, actually, that's a good conversation. We could do that another time. But this is what we agreed to talk about this time. So time and topic, and then purpose. Why are we having this conversation? And a fundamental way to me that's helpful to describe this is convergence or divergence. Convergence says we need to come to a shared understanding. We need to make a decision about what we're going to do about something. That's very different from saying our purpose is to know what the thoughts are, to better understand a greater variety of things. We don't have to convince anybody of anything. We don't have to come to an agreement. Those are two very different kinds of conversations, both very good. We need to have an agreement when we start of what our purpose is, and especially if we're converging, what are we having to converge upon? What are we having to decide? Another key shared boundary is emotional temperature. What I mean by that is some conversations will be challenging in terms of strong emotions, positive and negative. And we need to be in agreement on what range of emotions are okay. Some cultures and some of us are very comfortable with expressions of strong emotion, positive and negative, to shout, to make direct accusations about people, and this can be a very helpful way for many of us to engage. And others of us, as soon as it starts that direction, we shut down. That we aren't comfortable with the strong emotion that gets in the way of having a genuine conversation. And so rather than saying there's one answer to that question, we're saying that we should have a shared understanding about what this conversation will allow. And if we step outside of that, we agree to step back and take a breath, take a breather, so that we can stay in the space that we agreed with. And so then the last thing is the idea of navigators. We agree to have some people who are going to help us keep to these boundaries. There are two kinds of navigators. One is the conversation navigator, and this is the person who's going to guide our walk through the content. This is the person who will guide maybe with an opening question and guide the flow. And sometimes one person will speak at a time as we go around the table. Another time it's whoever would like to speak. Maybe there'll be times of silence. This is the conversation navigator. This is the person who will guide us in that process. And before we begin, we agree with who that will be. Or we'll agree that nobody is. We're going to do that together. But again, the idea is that we're in agreement on that as we begin. And then the boundary navigator is the person who will help us keep to what we agreed to as shared boundaries. So the boundary navigator is going to be the one who says, hey, we're running out of time. We're going to have to wrap up, or we're near the end of time for this segment. The boundary navigator will help guide about wandering off into other topics and say, it sounds to me like that's not quite the topic that we had planned to cover here. And so can we go back to what we had agreed with to help us with our purpose? And I think especially to help us with emotional temperature, that the boundary navigator is the person who says, I sense that things have gotten a bit more tense than maybe we have agreed we're going to do. And so I just want to call that to our attention and stop for a moment so that we can better manage our space together. So these are the ideas for when we are in this conversation, the boundaries in this room, the boundaries in the house. So a boundary of time and topic and purpose, then the emotional temperature, and then agreeing upon the roles that some people will play in helping us in this space. I should say that the boundary and conversation navigators could be the same person, although it's really hard to do. It's hard to think about the content and the process for the conversation while also actively paying attention to the time and the topic and the purpose and the emotional temperature. But it could be the same person. And we could agree to try to navigate these things as a group together, although I found that especially the second one is a pretty challenging thing to do as a group. So we've thought about the foundation, about the entry door, and now the shared boundaries. And the next time we'll be looking at the specific conversation strategies. The thing I want to end with today is, first of all, prayer. These are challenging things. These conversations are rich and good, and yet we know there's so much in our culture today that's going against having these conversations in a way that builds us up rather than tears us down. And so we want to pray. So I invite you to pray. Pray in our Thursday morning time, pray other times that you connect with people. And we're convinced that these ideas are helpful for conversations wherever they might be. And so we encourage each of us to approach conversations with this framework. And when you're having a conversation with somebody that might be a challenging one, I think it's really helpful to talk about boundaries together. Say, here's what we'll talk about, and there's an ending time, and when it is, we'll call time out because the emotion has gotten to a space that we're not comfortable with. So the encouragement is to try these things out, and especially I want to highlight paying attention to emotions. I think it's so important. And a key thing, first of all, is to be curious about my own emotions and the emotions of others. When I sense something's going on, I think I sense that there's a strong emotion coming before I know what it is. And to pay attention to that and to be curious and say, what am I feeling and why am I feeling that? And when I notice somebody else seems more tense, that their voice has changed or their posture, it's clear that there's strong emotion, to be curious. Say, I sense that something has touched a nerve. I'm curious what that is. And so as we go through the journey to pay attention to these emotions, and also in conversations to confirm if you agree on the temperature. Do we know when it is that, we really ought to stop and take a break and maybe come back to this later? Or when we agree that whatever the emotions are, we should keep plowing through. We should be in agreement on that. So it's an exciting journey to step into these things. And I'm excited to look at the strategies next time, and just want to end with a thought that says, this is all a work in progress. We're stepping into these things and learning, and I expect that we will never stop learning. And so this is where the framework stands today. Love your input and your ideas as we continue in this journey together.